Hi everyone, welcome back to the Chronicles on the Fly podcast. This is Simon. We've got a different type of episode for you this time. We have a guest with us, and that is Anthony Locascio, who is a comedian from Sydney. He's Italian/Greek/Aussie and a very funny guy who we came across because he interacted with us recently on our Serie A Chronicles Instagram account. Now, you'll probably remember from our last episode that Serie A Chronicles is the podcast which we are now producing about Italian football with popular UK journalists Nicky Bandini and Mina Rizzucchi. We kind of pinched the production of that from ESPN, and it's gradually increasing, and it's our little baby that we're producing via our media production company called Media Chronicles, keeping with the brand. And Anthony's a big fan of that, says that he has it top of his list when it comes to football podcasts, which is a nice wrap. We've also been getting a lot of positive messages about the podcast. So if you haven't checked that out, go and check out Serie A Chronicles. We had a really good chat with Anthony. Obviously, a lot of similarities between us three guys and him being, Italian background. He's also got the Greek half, I suppose you could call it, to throw in there, which is, we have a bit of a discussion about that. Also about his comedy, which you can find on his YouTube channel. Just search for Anthony Locascio. Very funny. He's got an hour-long special. So he's a very passionate football fan as well. And just quickly on Anthony, he's got his own podcast called the Kevin Lasagna Appreciation Podcast, which is a football podcast, him talking about the events happening around European football or football in general, mixed in with a lot of comedic stuff. So yeah, go and check that out too. For this episode, we actually went to a podcast studio rather than just doing it remotely, via computers. So I want to say thank you to the Hen House Rehearsal Studios in Osborne Park in Perth, who invited us in for a couple of hours free of charge just to try out the studio and see if we like it. So hopefully we'll use that a number more times in future. I do want to apologise for our audio. That's mine and Dom's and Mel's. We were, I suppose, experimenting with some new equipment in the studio and we probably didn't get it perfect. So next time we'll try to fix that. It's a little bit fuzzy, but it's not unlistenable. But Anthony's audio is spot on. But let's get into the show.
Hello, gents.
G'day, mate. How are we? All right?
Yeah, pretty good. Just plugging along. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm having my coffee for the afternoon while we're on this.
All right, mate. We all got it too, mate. Thanks, too.
Halfway through the episode, we'll all just get a little bit more energy and start yapping a bit more.
We probably should have brought the whiskey in, but welcome to the latest edition of Chronicles on the Fly podcast. We're doing a sort of a crossover /interview/chat today with a special guest. But firstly, we're back, the trio, Simon, Mel, and Dom. G'day, guys.
G'day, Simon.
We're all good. Okay. Special podcast today. We've got our first ever guest. You know that, Ant? This is the first ever guest we've had. We've been doing this on and off for a year and never even got it. I tell a lie.
No, we had Carl.
We did have Carl.
This is
Carl. You left such a big impression on us.
No offense to Carl. This is probably the first actual guest we have. Carl's family, so
yeah, fuck Carl.
It's a good starting point, shall we say?
Carl just wanted to talk about Sopranos.
Nothing wrong with
we'll
that,
probably do that again today anyway. All right, but our first decent guest, I want to welcome Anthony Locascio. And Anthony, I'll give you a bit of an intro, mate. You are one of Australian comedy's rising stars. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a comedian with us. He blends sharp joke writing with musings on his ethnic background. Anthony is Italo-Greco-Aussie, best known for his unique storytelling. His career started in 2017, and he's performed with some of the best comedians Australia has, including Dave Hughes. Anthony's written, produced, performed a solo hour of stand-up comedy every year since he started his career. And you should watch his hour-long Sydney Comedy Store special on his YouTube channel because it's very good, very funny. He also is a podcast host. He hosts the Hackpack podcast. But the one we really know him for is the Kevin Lasagna Appreciation podcast, which is about soccer of all brands, and it's a very good one. So, Anthony, welcome.
Thank you very much for that rousing intro, which is definitely not written by me.
Considering we lifted it off your website, mate. Yeah, you've got a creative copywriter there.
That's right. There's a special kind of person to call themselves one of Australia's rising stars. You know, it's by my own metric only.
Well, we can just pretend that we said that. It's our opinion, all right?
Yeah, nice. Thank you for having me on, gents. I'm pumped, and to all your listeners, jump aboard the Kevin Lasagna Appreciation Podcast. It's me, just talking shit about. Am I allowed to swear here?
100%.
Excellent. I'm just talking shit about some of the funny things that happen in football. I feel like, you know, occasionally you'll listen to a football-based podcast and you'll have the odd quip here and there, but it will just mostly be very serious. Oh, and Leicester defeated Manchester United this weekend, blah, 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 blah. But I focus on, okay, this is the funny shit that happened over the weekend. No analysis beyond that.
The first one that I listened to was the one where you were just going on about Kevin Muscat being an absolute an absolute gentleman of the game, and that resonated with me because I've always said the same. I can't stand him. I couldn't stand him as a player, as a coach, as anything. He shouldn't have existed in the world of football, in my opinion. So yeah, that was a great one. Kevin Muscat.
I should have said this on the episode. He's almost like a grubby park soccer player that somehow fluked his way to the top, but he just never stopped being that piece of shit that you play against on Saturday mornings.
Absolutely. And the funny thing about it is that if he had have cut that out of his game, he was actually a half decent player.
Yeah, he was. He was okay.
Yeah, but the game you need a villain every now and then. Like, I don't know, it's enjoyable to hate someone sometimes. Well,
it makes for great stories and podcast episodes, I suppose.
Exactly. Like you some players out there, you can't stand them, and they've got that head that just gets you every time you see it. Kevin Muscat's one of them. There's always about, like, Harry Maguire's one of them. He's got that head that you just like, man, I hope this guy fails in his career. And there's nothing to it besides just the way he looks sometimes, unfortunately. It's just one of those players.
I'll give him credit. Great penalty.
Oh, a good penalty taker. I'll give him that.
Oh, against Italy in the final.
Cracker penalty.
Speaking of grubby defenders that are good at penalties, Sergio Ramos just has a nice enough head that you can forgive every time he tries to break an opposing player's arm.
It's annoying when professional soccer players are ridiculously photogenic and good looking. It's like, come on, man! Like, say something for the rest of us.
Another player that I hated. Like, is he playing at the moment? He's at PSG. But
yeah, I think he played his first game. He was. He's playing his first game this week or something. Well, that team needs some leadership because
he's only played 4 games. He's only played 4 games this calendar year. So he only played 4 times for Real Madrid. Didn't get called up for the Euros for Spain, and he's yet to feature for PSG. So it's not been a banner year for our buddy.
He plays for a French team though, so he might be in with a Ballon d'Or shout, I reckon.
Playing in the Farmers League.
Yeah.
All right, and tell us, how old are you, by the way? You're not a woman, so I can ask you that.
I'm 29. Yes, it's perfectly kosher. I don't have a giant biological clock ticking in my brain, so it's okay. You can ask.
Actually, I saw the clip of on your YouTube channel last night about your mum talking about your sister's biological clock. I think it was something like that. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, she doesn't give a shit if I'm not single at the moment, but a couple of years ago, I got out of a long-term relationship, and my mum just couldn't care less. She was just like, "Yeah, you'll be fine, whatever." What about your sister, who's 4 years younger than me?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, how'd you get into comedy? Were you always, funny as a kid? Were you the class clown at school and that kind of thing?
So there's a few answers to this question. I was a funny kid privately. So within circles that I was really comfortable with, or at home, I was always very funny, but I wasn't the class clown. And I don't think that the class clown archetype ever becomes stand-up comedians, because they don't, have a void to fill within them that requires validation from strangers every night. They're fine. They're cool. They play footy. They're all right. It's never that guy that goes on to be a stand-up. I studied law at university because my parents told me, "Oh, you're a talker, so that's what you have to do." And so I listened to them. I ended up working in insolvency for a few years. So I was in liquidation and bankruptcy,
Oh, you poor bastard.
which is just it's the funnest place to be. You know, it's
The undertakers of the business world.
exactly. Just one of the slimiest things I've ever done in my life. This has been a great year for me. This is the year that I finally bit up the nerve and I quit my horrible corporate job. How do you feel about that? Nothing like the artificially generated applause. It's my favorite. I was a liquidation accountant, which is a funny job to do because you don't actually do any accounting work at all. What you do is all day write letters to people saying, "Dear sir, please vacate your family home of 40 years by the end of the week or we will force you to. Kind regards." It's a crazy job, surrounded by money-grubbing, horrible corporate zombies, and I couldn't deal with it. I was so stressed out all the time. And the way I would de-stress is to think to myself all day, you know what, I don't need this shit. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm gonna go tonight, I'll do the jokes, it'll go great. But that doesn't always work out. Sometimes the jokes don't go great. I hang out with the comedians, they're assholes, they don't want to talk to me, and I end up thinking to myself, you know what, I don't need this shit. I'm a liquidation accountant. I just felt that, I've always loved stand-up and I always wanted to do it, but my parents are born in Australia, but my grandparents, my mum's parents are born in Greece and they came over here, and my dad's parents are born in Italy and they came over here. And I think as a second generation Aussie, you can't really go home as a 19-year-old and say, yeah, look, I'm going to pursue a career in the arts. It doesn't work that way. It's like, how are you going to make money? You're going to disgrace the family. You're going to embarrass us. How are you going to make money? So it was never an option. But I was 4 years into this career that was slowly just draining me mentally and on a like a spiritual level. It really was crushing me. And I ran out of excuses to not try this thing that I'd always want to try. I used to get asked to do 21st speeches for people that I wasn't even that close friends with, but I was really good at I'd never write anything down. I would just come up with stuff. So I knew that I could be funny in that kind of context. And the idea occurred to me to rally together 400 wogs into a theater, not charge them tickets so that I actually turn up, and do a 1-hour show and film it. I did it. It was dog shit. But it was a platform for me to kind of continue to move through. And after about 6 months of kind of shipping these videos around and developing an online presence, I decided I don't have to work. I don't want to do this career anymore. I want to just focus primarily on stand-up. And so in 2018, I quit the insolvency thing, and I've been full-time doing this ever since. I've had a few different day jobs throughout the years, but yeah, things are going well enough that it's not a dumb idea to have done it just yet.
Yeah, right. So, but in the last, I suppose, 18 months, close to 2 years, I mean, what have you been able to do with, lockdowns on and off and all that kind of stuff?
So yeah, it's been quite difficult, and it was almost just the worst time, because I won't go too much into it, but at the start of, just before COVID hit, I was sort of supposed to go on my first kind of national tour, and that kind of got canned. The only thing that I've been able to do is I was promised that I could do a 1-hour show as a makeup for the tour being cancelled at the Sydney Comedy Store in December last year, so 2020. So I basically spent the year preparing material and writing for that. Luckily, the lockdown in Sydney in 2020 only lasted for about a month. So I was back out performing quite quickly. I wasn't able to go into state, obviously, but I had that show to prepare for. So I did it, and we filmed it, and now I'm sort of trying to sell the film to some streaming services, which is pretty fun.
Netflix, here we come.
Yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see. This time around, I was supposed to do a similar thing. I was supposed to do the Perth Comedy Festival last year, cancelled. I was supposed to do the Perth Comedy Festival this year. It was on. The whole festival went ahead as planned, except there was 1 week that there was an outbreak in Perth, and for just that 1 week they shut down the festival, and that was the week that I was supposed to be there. So that got cancelled. Then they said you can do a catch up in September. I said great. Then there was the lockdown here, so I think Perth is kind of just cursed for me.
Well, I think a lot of people have that opinion.
Yeah, but I'll definitely get there next year. And then the last thing that I've tried to do, because you can't chuck all your eggs in one basket. I've just been trying the podcast thing, and I was doing the interviews. I was doing the Hack Pack podcast that you guys mentioned, where I would just interview comedians about the scene, and just to let people know what it's like to be a person that pursues comedy and what's involved. And I just thought that it would be something fun to do with my friends, but it has turned out to be a little bit more interesting than I assumed, which is the opposite of my other podcast, because I thought that the Kevin Lasagna thing would be very interesting to people, but it's taking a little while to develop an audience. But I'm just I'm like crazy obsessed with football, and I just think to myself, this has got to go somewhere.
It's a weird technological time we live in. It's an overwhelming technological time that we're in. And I know that I'm qualified for social discourse because I listen to podcasts. So many podcasts available, whatever your thing that you want to listen to, you listen to podcasts, and there's people talking about it. The podcast is kind of weird. I find them weird. It's like you're eavesdropping on somebody's private conversation that you weren't invited to. So what I like to do to cut the tension is whenever they're finished talking about any one given topic, I'll just pause it and then audibly give my opinion on whatever they were talking about and then continue the podcast. Otherwise it'd be weird, right? It'd just be strange. Like, let me tell you about my experience on psilocybin mushrooms. I don't know. That's infiltrated my normal discourse, though. It's weird. Like, the lines get blurred with normal conversations. I don't know what's real and what's fake. I have a normal conversation with people and I'll be like, hey, Mum, I really want to keep hearing about that pot roast, but first, I got to give a shout out to my guys at Squarespace.
I've got to ask you about the Kevin Lasagna podcast. Now, my main question is, why Kevin Lasagna?
Because, first of all, I've never heard a better name in my life.
I agree. Hands down, agree. Total. Yeah. Agree with that.
Declan Rice gives him a run for his money in terms of like a culinary-based footballer, but you just can't. I mean, no offense if you guys have any mates, but Kevin is just the dumbest English first name. It sounds like a verb, you know.
Yeah, I was saying to the boys earlier that Kevin Lasagna sounds like a name you'd ask a child to make up an Italian name, and the name would be Kevin 100%.
Lasagna. Funnily enough, when we were going through high school doing Italian class, we had these books were called Avanti, and they had all these different characters. There was Dario, I can't remember, but one of the male kid characters was called Kevin, and he used to always say, "Mi chiamo Kevin." And back then I used to think, why are they giving this Italian kid supposedly the name Kevin? Like, it used to blow my mind. And then comes along Kevin Lasagna podcast. But
I had Avanti too, and I did Italian at school. But I think maybe they had recast Kevin by this point in the series. But there's this thing in Germany as well, which I mentioned on one of the earlier episodes. That's called Kevinism in Germany, where they make fun of anybody that kind of appropriates American culture or feeds too much into American things as opposed to European things. They call them a Kevin, and it's Kevinism. So I don't know if the two are related.
Well, that's a huge thing in Europe, but especially in Italy. And if you listen to if you watch Italian soccer on Rai or whatever, all the English words that they use, corner, tackle, offside, it really grinds my bones. It gives me the shits because there's Italian equivalent words for this. Why can't you just use them? But they just love to pepper in the English words, don't they?
I love calcio d'angolo. It's just so so basic.
The other they use all the time is pericoloso. They always say pericoloso, right?
That's Italian.
Yeah, but they all like it's like their go-to description for every situation is dangerous. Pericoloso.
I love when they say, you know, players in an offside position, in posizione offside. Why can't you just say
so
fuori
good.
gioco?
Yeah. It's probably just trying to appeal to a wider mass is really what it is. The fact, look, I'm more annoyed that they do like the Coppa Italia in Saudi Arabia than them calling offside. Like that just seems weird to me. Why play a continental competition in another country? That's just like, I don't know, in another continent, country.
Why do you think?
Because of money, of course.
Oil money, mate.
It is, but that just seems like when you talk about, if you can't, they whinge about Super League and you can't be bought, like things can't be bought. And I was like, but you're doing it consistently, and the hypocrisy is just baffling. Like you're hypocrites about it all the time.
It's a waste of time, and it's a waste of the players' times. And thankfully, this year, they're doing it at San Siro. They're doing it at San Siro in January. It's Inter Juve, and Juve have to play Napoli like 3 or 4 days later, something like that. So they're not happy about it being played at San Siro either. But it's so much better than Saudi Arabia.
Oh, you're obviously a big Juventus fan, right?
Yes, unfortunately.
How did you become a Juventus fan?
So my dad really indoctrinated me quite young. I think I stop me if I'm wrong, but I can imagine that you guys are somewhere within the Calabria, Sicily, Napoli.
Calabrese.
Mm-hmm. These two are brothers, Dom and Mel brothers. They're Calabrese.
Okay.
With a little sprinkle of Sicilian somewhere in the ancestry. Come on, you have to admit it.
It's a grain of salt.
Whereas I'm full Sicilian.
It's very watered down.
I'm full Sicilian on both sides. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So my family's full Sicilian as well on my Italian side, and I just think that the de facto Sicilian team, but you would probably tell me a little bit different, to just be Juve fans, because my nonno was a big Juve fan, and my dad was as well, but I was not a football fan at all as a kid. I hated it. I was not interested. Until maybe about the 2002 World Cup, and then I finally got sucked in. But yeah, he indoctrinated me to be a Juve fan, and it was game over from there.
So as a kid, did you go watch Marconi or Apia, or which team would have been in?
I refused.
Yeah.
As a little kid, I refused. I didn't want to be dragged. My dad made me play under 5s and under 6s. I hated it. I was one of the kids that pulled out grass and collected sticks and shit like that. And then something just happened that just clicked in my head. I think to be honest, if I can get a little vulnerable on your podcast, given that we've just met, but I think when my parents got divorced, I wanted to get into soccer a bit more to stay close to my dad. I haven't done the mental arithmetic yet to figure it out, but that seems like it could be the truth.
Yeah, I mean that's nice that you mentioned that. That's the beauty of football, I think, because you really generally you take after who your dad went for, right?
Generally,
in the general sense.
Not in your case.
Not in my case, but my two brothers. My dad is a Juve fan. My two brothers are Juve fans. Their dad is a Juve fan. They're both Juve. These two guys, they're both Juve fans, right? I'm a little bit the black sheep of the family. Not so much these days, but I was as a kid a bit. So I went against the grain. My first introduction really to football was my uncle, who lived in Rome, from Sicily, but lived in Rome. He was a sales rep for Barilla, obviously the traditional sponsor of Roma shirt back in the 80s.
Beautiful surname.
Sent over Roma shirts for her. I was like, 5, 6? So bang, I'm a Roma fan. But then came along Italia 90, and it was really cemented because I fell in love with Giuseppe Giannini. As soon as I saw him play, that's it. I'm Roma for life, because I just thought he was the most stylish, elegant player I'd ever seen. And still to this day, he's my football idol, maybe alongside or maybe just a little bit above Roberto Baggio.
What about Totti?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about?
No, I'm a bit different. I always preferred Del Piero over Totti as a player.
And you love Batistuta?
So you're a smart man then.
Oh, look, I mean, there's a huge Roma-Juventus rivalry. It's almost as big as the Roma-Lazio rivalry over in Italy. But hey, I'm not in Italy. I don't live that rivalry. This is the way I suppose, explain it to myself. I grew up in a family of Juventus fans. So Juventus was everywhere, right? And it was a struggle for me to get any Roma word in, maybe, I suppose. But I do have a bit of a soft spot for Juventus because I can see, they're a team to be admired. Everyone hates them, but why do you hate them? You hate them because you want to be them.
But also, so this is my absolute Juventus elitism. We're so you guys seen Mad Men? That scene in the elevator where the guy says to him, I feel sorry for you, and he says to him, I don't think about you at all.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of how Juve are with the rest of the. I personally, no offense, but I personally see every other team other than Inter as just a Juventus feeder academy. Because if there's a player that's good enough, we'll get him.
Well, yeah, Roma definitely are because I could probably list you in 20 seconds. I could probably come up with close to 10 players that have gone from Roma to Juventus that have pissed me off.
Exactly.
Because if they had have stayed, what might we have had? But Roma needs the money.
Different circumstances.
Yeah. It's a big shame. I can think of specifically when Luciano Moggi was in charge and Roma won the Scudetto, the last Scudetto they had, Juve just pinched Emerson and Capello from Roma and just said, thank you very much, we'll have that.
Who else went? I think Zerbino went, not that he was a great player, but he was a Scudetto winner, and then he went to Juventus as well.
For an absolute useless right back, he had a pretty decent career in Serie A, Zerbino.
Well, he had a decent year, the year of Roma's Scudetto in 2000-2001. So
and just coasted off that forever.
Yeah.
I also think about a few years ago when Juve's two closest rivals in the league were Napoli and Roma, and Juve just bought their best players. Yeah. They just pinched Higuain and Pjanic and just said,
it's kind of like Mercedes in the Formula One at the moment. Well, it's got a little bit closer this year with Red Bull and other teams, but in the past 5 or 6 years, it's just been just Mercedes. And
bar 2018 when Ferrari stuffed it up.
And the last 10 years, it's 9 Juventus Scudetti in a row. It's just been it almost makes you lose the interest in the sport when it's like that. Maybe not for you.
Almost.
That's one of the things why I like being a Roma supporter, because I believe it's more romantic to have the heartbreak or to have the struggle. You know what I mean? Rather than the expectation that if we don't win the Scudetto this year, it's a failure. Whereas if you're coming from being a Roma or Napoli or who else could you say, Lazio or even supporter, that between 3rd spot to 7th spot kind of expectation, that's what you're hoping for, to get the European spot basically, and maybe nick a Champions League qualification. That's really the level that you're always at. When you do eventually win a Scudetto once in 20 years or whatever it is, if that, I mean, there's a reason why they say winning a Scudetto in Rome is worth 10 in Milan or Torino. It's true because...
Yeah, Francesco Totti has said that.
Do you remember everything that happened in the last 10 years of Juventus Scudetti? Of course you don't.
If I really thought hard, I would. But if you were...
You'd have to go into some YouTube highlights and look up on Wikipedia probably to jog your memory. Whereas 100%. I could tell you plenty that happened in 2000-2001 for Roma Scudetto. And I'm not saying that's a great thing, that it's better to be a Roma fan. Of course I would love more success. And Roma should have had more success if they would lose a bit of the mentalità romana, let's say, because that is a real stumbling block, right? They trip themselves up, They should have had probably 3 or 4 Scudetti since they won the last one. But yeah,
I would have. I think the entire nation was rooting for Roma towards the end of the 2000s when Inter were just untouchable.
Yeah.
They had some really nice teams back then.
2010, the year of Inter's triplete, they call it, which is such a fake hat trick, if you ask me. It's only a Calciopoli, treble. Let's be honest. Which they had the major part in and got untouched for.
Hey, you don't need to convince me.
Oh man, this is why I hate that club so badly. They're such hypocrite bastards. that year Roma should have won the Scudetto. They tripped up against Sampdoria away, and then it was all over. So
Yeah,
shame.
Pazzini scored 2 goals, was it? Was that Pazzini?
And Cassano playing for them as well, just to rub it in.
Yeah, just to rub it in. I love Cassano. I did a special on Cassano. He's just pure entertainment.
Oh, I haven't heard that one. I'll have to check that out. He's actually, he can come up with some good stuff. I don't know if you ever watch the Bobo TV that he does with Christian Vieri, Daniele Adani, and Nicola Ventola. So the 4 of them do a YouTube and Twitch show. It seems like it's on every day, but they do have some good commentary when I catch some of it.
Oh, he's full of shit, but he's just always entertaining. They asked him a few years ago why he never played for Juve, and he said something along the lines of, "It's a beautiful woman that just doesn't get me hard."
Mm-hmm. I think it's more the other way around, that they wouldn't touch a basket case like him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely the truth, but it's nice that he thinks that,
Yeah.
Cassano's one of those interesting ones that still goes on about how good he could have been even after he's been, which amazes me. I'm like, you already had your moment, but he still goes on about, if I tried a little bit harder, I would have been amazing. I'm like, well, you didn't though.
A lot of players say that after their career ends. It's basically they're voicing their regret.
Yeah, it's essentially what it is. But if you ever watch his first goal for Bardi, like Cassano, he's an amazing goal. Like, it actually is an amazing goal. I'll give him that. Right? That
created it. Right? That's probably the reason Roma bought him.
Yeah, after that whole thing. And
he was great linking with Totti, but then he just lost the plot, and so they had to get rid of him.
It's a fine line, though, because it's a fine line between being, like, you need that arrogance to be a top player. You need to believe you are the best, right? But it's a fine line between being arrogant and just being a dickhead.
Yeah, being a douchebag.
And he crossed that line too many times, right? Absolutely. And that's the whole thing. And it takes a special person not to be able to cross that line, to understand where that line is and remain still part of he'll blame the club and not himself and stuff like that. And that sometimes, like, mate, you got to take some responsibility and know what's on you. But that's Cassano. Cassano was always, it's their fault, not mine, sort of thing.
Similar to Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah,
it's the team's fault.
I know, but
when he loses.
Lewis is a bit different because really he's only competing with one other car for the last 5 years. It's a lot easier to compete against one other car than another 11 people on the pitch or whatever it is that you're dealing with. There's that scenario, but he had the opportunity to do whatever he wanted to. And he would be like Balotelli, mate, too busy doing life, didn't worry too much about the football.
One thing you said before, Anthony, about football podcast, how they can be so boring. They just talk, the result and what happened. They just recount what happened, that kind of thing. I totally agree, right? Like, there are so many football podcasts and then so many Italian football podcasts. And maybe this is a little bit of elitism for me because we kind of produce a football podcast. But part of the reason why we grabbed, the hosts to do our podcast, Serie A Chronicles, is because of the shit that was out there, or still is out there in Italian football podcast commentary. It's so drab, and so the production value of it is so pathetic. Like, you can't listen to it. They sound like they're in the bathroom, and they just talk shit. There's nothing interesting about it. I was just driving here today. I had one, down the freeway. I put one on, and I know I don't listen to them anymore because I just concentrate on the one that we do. But I decided, I thought I'd listen to one. I won't mention it because I don't want to rubbish anybody. Oh, man, I got 5 minutes in and I just went, no, I'm done. Like, I'm so glad of, with having Nikki and Mina, because they're, a little bit flamboyant. They go off on tangents and they laugh and they're sarcastic, but they're quite knowledgeable as well. And it's, I got a message from a friend yesterday saying, I was listening to, he was saying that he was listening to some other podcast and, he couldn't handle it anymore because they're so boring. And that what we're doing, we've got a really good product. So yeah, you are definitely right. The podcast landscape is a little bit drab when it comes to Italian football.
Well, I completely agree with you, which is why I was so excited when I saw that Serie A Chronicles are starting, because not only do I just love Nikki and Mina. I mean, for the last, 4 or 5 years, whenever I've seen any other podcast that features one of them as a guest, I always make sure to listen to it.
Right. And I was always the same. I would always listen to those two. But yeah, those two, I would always listen to their podcast, whatever they were on. And I still do. Even though they're on our podcast that we produce, I still listen to them when they're on the other podcast. But yeah, I think they're great. They're great football minds.
Yeah, 100%. And if anything, it's an ad for Serie A Chronicles if they go on a different show. And, new listeners like Nikki's opinion on the Guardian podcast and think, oh, who's this person? I like listening to her. Then they come over and they become new listeners. So it's...
You're also saying that, about trying to grow a podcast, like, your Kevin Lasagna Appreciation podcast. It is hard. It is a real hard slog. And even though we've got two hosts who are pretty high profile in the football commentary and punditry world, it's still such a hard slog to grow it. It's amazing. I thought it would take off faster than it has, and it is on an upward trajectory each week. But it is hard to get the listenership up. But the comments that are coming in is like people are blown away about how good it is, but still hard slog to get it to where they had it when it was done by ESPN, because they were getting, they were in the ESPN FC feed, right? So they were in amongst all their other podcasts, so they're getting crossover listeners, and they were averaging about 30,000 downloads for the Serie Awesome podcast, as it was called then, per week. Yeah. So that's where I want to get it, because I know that that's the potential of it. But yeah, we're a bit way off there.
Well, thankfully they, at that point they had the backing of ESPN, so it's a completely different monolith. But Serie A Chronicles is just objectively better than Serie Awesome, just because Matteo Bonetti's not on it.
American football commentators.
Yeah, he just annoys me. I don't. Fuck it. I'll just say it. He annoys me. I don't like. He just gives me virgin energy. I'm sure he's not a virgin, but he gives me virgin energy.
He's all right. I think he's all right. I think there's far worse than him, in my opinion. Obviously, I think there's far worse than him if we're going to say that he's not great. But because we're tossing around whether we can get him on as a guest at some point.
Oh, all right. Edit this out then.
So Matteo Bonetti is a legend.
Legend. I've rarely seen any Italian Americans talk about football any better. Although I must admit, I don't know if you guys are around the IFTV guys. I don't know if it's competition. We're not allowed to talk about them or whatever. But they're cool. I don't mind them. They got character.
I mean, to be honest, I don't see anybody as competition. I think that there's enough ears out there that everyone should kind of help each other out or talk each other up, to be honest. And, if I say I think a podcast is shit, I'm not going to name that podcast, right? In general, the more that people are out there talking about Serie A, the better it is, right? Because, what's the saying? High tides lift all boats, right? You got to look at it that way. Have an abundance mentality about it, I suppose, right? Obviously, you want to be the top one, but
to that point, it's so my friend ran a podcast a few years ago, and he always this is when we first started comedy, and his podcast was about nothing. You just interview people, and it would just be what's your life, and he would just try and find interesting people, and yet somehow just through sheer perseverance and through just putting in the months and years of work, the audience just grows. So it's not necessarily about having a particular niche that just explodes. It's time put in. It's continuing to produce, continuing to put in the work and producing quality things. I did an episode a few weeks ago where I was just so hungover and it was the worst thing that I've ever done. But
good podcast.
You're
honest. I appreciate that. It was good.
At least you got out there and did it on a rough day. That's the important thing, isn't it? You're back on the horse.
Oh, it was rough, but yeah, got to give the people what they want. But it is so. I'm actually thinking about rebranding the Kevin Lasagna podcast, giving it a different name, because my idea at the start was that Kevin Lasagna is such an in joke among football fans that. It would make anybody that's a dedicated football fan see it and go, okay, what's this? But the problem is that most football fans globally, you know, it's the most globally visible sport, which means the proportion of absolute idiots that are football fans is much higher than anything else. And I wouldn't be surprised if the vast majority of football fans had never heard of Kevin Lasagna at all. So it's kind of working against me. But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weirdly named podcasts out there that do well. I mean, when we were naming Serie A Chronicles, we were initially tossing around. Ideally, what we wanted to do was keep Serie Awesome because that's what it was called on ESPN. But we thought, you know what? I don't want to get a letter from the lawyers, so we're gonna start as a rebrand, you know, as a reboot. So we were initially going to call it Culture Chronicle, and the reason why is because that's been the name of our WhatsApp group with, you know, five or six of us friends and brothers and that for, you know, close to 10 years. So calling the podcast Cultural Chronicles just made sense. However, then I was discussing with Nikki and Lena, all right, what's more searchable, culture or Serie A? If someone's looking for something to do with Italian football in the English-speaking world, it's more likely that they're going to type in Serie A. So that's why we went with Serie A.
100%.
And the Chronicles,
100%.
just because that's, I suppose, you know, our production company's Media Chronicles was just a brand name. I suppose.
It is also hard sometimes because you're looking, like they talk Serie A, which is like, you know, we follow Serie A, right? But there are times like Nikki is obviously also an Arsenal fan. And often she'll just mention little things about that.
She's actually said she doesn't really have an Italian team. She probably leans closer
towards Inter
because her family does, but really she doesn't care too much.
But when you think of the Serie A Chronicles, you think it's just going to be Serie A, and it's really hard to say. Well, yeah, they talk other things as well, but generally that's the focus. And like same with your Kevin Lasagna podcast, like you talk a lot about the English Premier League, and I watch English Premier League. I watch a bit of Spanish here and there as well. But I generally always watch English Premier League and the Italian league, and so kind of I appreciate that. But it's very hard to, you know, have that where you're drawing from both crowds, because it's not. I don't know if there's how often you can pull someone from a Premier League listener to a Serie A listener in one sentence, if that makes sense. It's very hard to join the two.
Unless you're the BBC or the Guardian or something like that, you know, a major publisher.
Exactly.
You know, then you've got like the EuroLeague's podcast, for example, something like that, which, you know, is about European, so you're casting a wider net.
But I'll listen to Anthony's podcast, and I know he's talking about, like he spoke about Newcastle. And
that was a good one about Newcastle.
His hatred of Newcastle, which I kind of appreciated. I thought that was kind of there. And things like, do you even have a Premier League team? Would you say you're aligned to someone?
Yeah, I do, but I'm scared to admit it.
Oh, you should be.
So
you should be.
This was where the indoctrination ended for my dad, because he's just a crazy Liverpool supporter, and he tried to, you know, he bought me all the Liverpool jerseys, and as soon I fell wholeheartedly in love with Jose Mourinho's first Chelsea team, and since then I've been a Chelsea supporter.
Chelsea.
I just don't have an English team. I don't mind watching.
How can you not love Zola when he's at
but they're not there anymore.
Vialli.
But a minute ago, he's gone.
But you're saying that something grabbed you as a kid. Giannini grabbed you as a kid.
Yeah, but then came Totti as well, so it was pretty easy to stick in.
Sorry, mate. Sorry, Shevchenko then went to Chelsea and Crespo and stuff like that, which all Serie A.
I grew up in an Italian household, so to say that I'm a fan of an English team when there's such a big. I grew up playing soccer against Pom, and the Pommy teams with the Pommy kids were our biggest rivals. And I'm going to go and support one of their teams? No way. I like watching it. I like watching the highlights. Look at Mo Salah. He's probably the best player in the world at the moment. Another one we had to let go. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I just it's never computed in my mind. How can I call myself a fan of an English team?
I understand that, but then Chelsea played Juve in the Champions League 3 weeks ago or something like that, and I was clearly going for Juve. Like that wasn't even it wasn't a battle for me at all. Like I clearly have a Juve favourite, but Juve doesn't play the Premier League. I will concede the year of Leicester's title was that 2016.
Yeah,
they won it? Right. I was rooting for them because obviously Ranieri, the coach, right, former Roma coach at the time. Coach Roma again. Romano, Italian, romantic story of, you know, a minnow, an underdog. Yeah, I loved the way they played, I thought they played some beautiful 1-2 touch football, quick movement on the carpet. Vardy finishing off great goals. I loved that season of watching Leicester. They were fantastic.
Also had one of the greatest names in football, Danny Drinkwater.
Bevilacqua. Bevilacqua got shot by Tony Soprano.
Danny Drinkwater goes into the football lunchbox with Kevin Lasagna and Declan Rice and those guys.
Classic. Danny Drinkwater. Can you think of anything more like simplistic for a footballer? But
I don't know if we're about to mention the same thing, but there's I don't know if we're allowed to talk about The Sopranos after your last podcast, but there's Matt Bevilacqua in The Sopranos, who's another Drinkwater.
Yes, that's
and
what
I
I
think
just referred
he
to. Yeah.
flip-flops. He flip-flops in the show, but he goes by Drinkwater at the start. Then when he starts getting in a little bit more with the Tony Soprano crew, he goes by Bevilacqua. And then once him and the other guy shoot Christopher and he's on the run, he goes back to Drinkwater again.
Is that really what happened? I recall the Drinkwater reference in the show.
Yeah. So whenever he introduced himself, when he was, you guys remember the characters, it's him and this other guy, and they're just like the young up and comers. But
I've watched the series probably 6 times over, so it's probably silly that I don't know, that I didn't realise.
I actually haven't finished watching the series.
Mel hasn't finished watching it. What a clown!
But amazing.
I won't.
But you can spoil it because I just keep reading about it anyway, so I know all the spoilers.
He's seen the last thing.
Where are you up to, Mel? Where are you up to?
In season 2, episode 10 or 11, somewhere around there.
Okay, so maybe this. Well, either way, so there's Matt Bevilacqua and there's Sean, the other guy, and they're always going up and brown nosing to Silvio and Paulie. They're always going up to these guys and introducing themselves, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we met last week." Matt Bevilacqua, Drinkwater, and he always makes sure to give himself that. And then there's the scene where they're playing poker and Silvio keeps spilling the cheese on his feet, and Tony tells Matt Bevilacqua to go and clean it up, and Silvio just loses his mind at him. They're really funny, those two.
Silvio, I stuffed it into my socks. It smells like your sister's crotch in the morning.
Yo, get the gravy, get the gravy.
I was just watching a YouTube clip of that one the other day. So they're always popping up on the algorithm just knows YouTube. So
actually,
it shows me Sopranos clips all the time.
The 4th of November, the movie, Many Saints in New York.
Yes, I've seen the movie. Have you seen the movie, Anthony?
I have not.
Okay. I won't spoil anything.
I was supposed to go and watch with a group of mates, but they decided to betray me and stream it a few weeks ago. So I'm probably going to go and watch it in the cinemas by myself at some point.
Is it on stream on Netflix?
No, but I've seen it. Okay.
You can illegally download it.
I would never do such a thing. How dare you accuse me?
Never.
But I've seen it. I've seen it twice, actually. I watched it first time on my own and the second time together with my wife. And, yeah, I'm still confused. I'm still undecided. I won't give anything away, but I'm just... What's that? What's that?
I said didn't get it illegally. The movie just fell off the back of the truck.
Yeah, the DVD landed in my letterbox.
Did it have one of those videos with the guy standing up and walking across the screen during the film?
No. I've just got connections in the studio. I know David Chapelle. But yes, I've watched it twice and I still don't know whether it's a good movie. I don't know whether it's absolutely shit or whether in 10 years' time we'll still be talking about it as a brilliant movie. I don't know.
The fact that you watched it twice, it can't be really shit. Because there's not many films that would go, oh, shit.
Would you watch Coming to America 2 twice? There you go. Let me ask you that one.
It's related to The Sopranos, which me and my wife love. I mean, me and my wife watched this, we were binging Sopranos on our honeymoon. As
well. Things on your honeymoon.
Can't 24/7. But we were... that's how much we love Sopranos. We probably watched The Sopranos twice over together. I've probably watched it 6 times over, the whole series myself. So of course we were going to watch this movie together. That's why I watched it the second time, so that I could watch it with her. The first time I couldn't wait for her. She was busy with kids.
I couldn't fathom watching something shit twice. Like you mustn't have been shit.
The acting is actually pretty good. The main character who
Ray Liotta, isn't it?
Ray. No. the main character
Real.
who plays Dicky Moltisanti is really a good performance. But whether
That's Alessandro Nivola.
yeah, he's really good.
He was in. I don't know if you guys remember the original Goal with Santiago Munez.
Yeah, classic. That was my high school moment.
He was Alessandro Nivola was his mate / rival at Newcastle United. I can't remember the name of the player, but he played the sort of Alan Shearer figure at Newcastle, and then they became good mates, and they went to.
I know you appreciate the humour in football, but I'm pretty sure it was about a couple months ago where Newcastle signed a player from Mexico called Santiago Munoz. And I was like,
Amazing.
This is amazing. Is he eventually going to get transferred to Real Madrid? I so hope so. This happens in real life.
Santiago playing at Santiago.
But it was just, it's like, what are the odds that they created a film and then 15 years later they signed that kid with the same name to Newcastle
I haven't
United?
seen the film.
Oh, the film's rubbish. Don't worry about it. You're not missing anything out, right?
It's pretty bad.
It is a crock of shit, right? Like, you will not watch it twice. I'll put it to you that way, Simon. Okay. And funnily enough, right, they made 3 of them. I don't know how they funded the second 2 after the first one. There you go. Because football movies do not work like gridiron movies. They don't work like that. So it's just not the same. I don't know. There's not many football movies that you could actually say, all right, that's a real good movie, right? Yeah. What are you going to do? Bend it like Beckham. Right,
The best sport movies are probably baseball movies.
Gridiron.
Right?
Any given Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Remember the titles.
I get that.
The Blind Side.
Yeah.
Field of Dreams is one of my talking about Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
Goal. The first one was just globally so popular. It's a shit movie, but it did so well, the first one. And I think off the back of that, they made I watched Goal 2. I never watched Goal 3 because Goal 2 was just dog shit. But it was cool because they had cameos from Beckham and Thierry Henry and Zidane. It was pretty cool from that perspective.
That's and you would have been yours too, like high school. That came out when I was probably in high school. That was a big, and so that was kind of a big thing. But even back then, it was rubbish. But it was just cool to see something about football. That was a mainstream movie. Because all the movies at the time were all gridiron movies or baseball movies or something like that. And that was probably one of the few that were different. And like you still look back now, and it actually probably got worse than I remember. So I watched some segments again, and I was like, yeah, I don't remember it being this shit, and it was shit back then. So did you ever play soccer, Anthony?
Yeah. And theoretically, I still am playing, even though the last 2 seasons this season we had 3 or 4 matches and then cancelled, and last year the start of it was not on, and then we had maybe an 8-game season. So yeah, I play. I'm not the best, but my goal, I'm a worker. I run up and down the wing all day long, and my goal is to just not retire before my dad. So he's 56. He's still going.
Wow.
So I've got to keep going.
Good on him. Good old Sam.
So you play for Piemonte Calcio on FIFA 22?
Oh my God. The bane of my existence.
You see, I'm not what you would call a gamer, but I do have this ritual that I perform every year. I buy the latest copy of FIFA, I win the Champions League back-to-back with my club Juventus, and I don't touch it again until the next year's edition is released. People say to me, bro, you want to play me online? You want to play me, bro? And I say, fuck off. I don't want to play you online. I don't want to play you in person. I don't want to fucking know you. I play against the computer only. Because if I lose and I throw a tantrum, the computer isn't going to send me messages all week calling me sad shit dick. All right? I can rage quit a game. I don't want to be put in a position where I have to rage quit a friendship. I don't want to do that. I'm a bad combination of intensely competitive and intensely incompetent. I can't risk playing against the human being. In addition to only playing against the computer, I play semi-pro. It's the second easiest difficulty. I want to win every game at least 7-0. I'm not interested in realism. I'm not interested in bettering myself. I'm interested in vicarious conquest. I don't want to hunt bear. I want to hunt pheasant at close range with a machine gun.
Well, it's not going to be FIFA next year anyway. They haven't signed their agreement.
Yeah.
They've got to change the name.
Look, I'm a bit nostalgic. I still play FIFA 96.
You're living in the past, Mel.
PS1.
Actually, 97 was better with the indoor soccer. But anyway, we'll go.
Yeah, I'm showing my age.
I haven't played since FIFA 98. I had FIFA 98 on my Pentium 75 computer, and that's where it stayed. And that's where it stays.
Cheapest fellas, most people don't know what you're talking about.
I have FIFA 18. It was FIFA 18.
Yeah, I don't know. They're not going to call it FIFA anymore, so I wonder if they'll probably be EA.
I think they're going to call it FC. They're going to call it FC because EA Sports is they've lost the rights. So EA Sports will probably release a game, and then I would imagine FIFA will probably collaborate with a different company to release a different game.
The Pro Evolution.
The dollar
Pro Evolution's dead too. They stopped making new games. They've just continued to update the one from 2019 over and over again. But Pro Evolution sucks too.
I've never played it.
Pro Evolution is the original Piemonte Calcio because you'd play and they'd have just none of the teams. You're playing Merseyside Red and London Blue and it's Chelsea and Liverpool, and all of the teams are fake except for a handful of teams in Spain. Yeah. And now they've got Juventus and also Lazio, Roma, and Atalanta.
Yeah, that's correct.
But it doesn't surprise me that the Italian clubs will look at any kind of revenue stream they can get at the moment. It is pretty hard for them to compete.
They're all getting into the crypto tokens and all this kind of stuff.
And esports and that sort of shit as well.
And someone actually sent a message to, how we're doing the Q&A mini episode each week as well. Someone sent a question about these crypto tokens that all these clubs are getting into. Is basically asking, do you reckon it's a scam?
It's just donations, really.
We didn't do it on the show because it's not Nicky's and Mina's bag. It's not their area of knowledge. Yeah. So we let it go. But I think that's all a scam. Well, it's not going to be a valid currency.
Well, the theory was that you're meant to transfer it for things like game day tickets or merchandise or some shit like that. You can use it to spend back at the store or whatever it is, right? Something like that. That's not what it's going to be because it's not going to be that. It's just going to be everyone holding it and thinking they're going to be
thinking they've got a piece of the club.
Yeah, and that's all it's going to be. And it's all the Italian clubs and the Spanish clubs that are into it because they're the ones that are trying to grab any sort of revenue stream they can get. Which is why I was saying to Mel the other week, which is why I find it weird that Saudi Arabia have chosen like Newcastle. Not that Newcastle doesn't have the ability to, because they got a shitload of fans. They're the biggest club in Newcastle by far. Right? I get why you would do it. What I don't understand is why buy a club when you're competing with 6 other billionaires? Like, if you want to compete and win and become that, why wouldn't you not buy a mid-tier Italian club or something like that who would easily be able to do that? That doesn't make sense to me.
It's just so much easier to do it in the Premier League though, because the TV deals that all of even the bottom Premier League team makes more TV revenue than the entire budget of probably the 14 or 15 next clubs in Italy. So it's only the top 5 or 6 that would have any kind of money like that. So,
and especially now that Ronaldo's left Juventus. Yeah.
Exactly. So from an exposure point of view, you could if you're the Saudi Arabian public fund, which is basically the entire country of Saudi Arabia purchasing Newcastle, similar to how Qatar and Abu Dhabi have done it with PSG and Manchester City. If you're them and you think, well, okay, do I buy even say, do we buy Fiorentina, who have a pretty good owner right now, but let's say a Fiorentina size club. With all the work you need to do on the stadium, including purchasing the stadium, because chances are that they don't, most Serie A clubs, they rent the stadium from the council. They don't even own them. So you have to purchase the stadium. You have to do infrastructural improvements to it that haven't been even close to updated since the Italy World Cup. Not to mention the cleaning up the fan base, racism, getting season ticket holders to come in. You go with Newcastle, they've got a great stadium that's already built. You don't have to worry about shit like that. All you have to worry about is getting the right kind of manager in and team that can build a football culture and then slowly purchase players that can make them competitive.
The thing is, now you want to do that. Man City's already doing that. Chelsea's already doing that. Yeah,
I don't think
Mhm.
like Saudi Arabia don't care about winning the Premier League.
No, I understand.
It's the exposure and the ease of it.
I get it.
Like
It's
Anthony's
sports
saying,
washing.
compared to the hurdles you're going to face if you buy a Fiorentina.
No, within respect, this is the sport washing we're talking about, right? We get that, and not saying that.
Sport washing.
And their thing is ego as well, right? So
I totally think it's ego.
They want to be.
I think it's purely ego.
Yeah. So Saudi Arabia want to be bigger than Qatar, want to be bigger than the Emirates. That's so I get all that aspect of it, right? And now, you're the public investment fund, so on face value, if you're talking about an investment, right, you're assuming, right, that this team is going to compete for the Premier League, right? So they have to do that. Right? That's the first thing. Now, you're competing with 6 or 7 big clubs just to get there, right? Now, unless you're in Europe every year, right, why would players want to? Yes, players will pay for you for money, but if you're not in Europe, you're not playing for the prestige. Right? So you need to make it there to get half-decent players that are even in there. You could go to Italy and pretty much guarantee you're going to get a Champions League every year if you want. They could buy AC Milan, right? Now, the thing about the stadiums and all that sort of stuff, I get that. But they're about to sink £200 million to buy players for Newcastle. The stadium in Italy would cost you nowhere near that to build.
Well, what did you
£200 million?
What did Juve?
That's just 1 year, one transfer season. They could buy the stadium and build one if they wanted to do that, if they needed to, right?
But what you're up against in Italy is look at Roma. They've been trying to get shovel in the ground to start a new stadium for more than 10 years.
Italy, they can bribe who they want to bribe.
mess.
It's fine, all right? That's not a problem, okay? You know that's the case, all right?
Two or three lots of American owners in Roma have got.
Yeah, but American owners are the complete opposite of those other owners. American owners are in there to draw money out because they know how sport teams work, right? That's American owners. American owners are very, very different to other owners, Russians, whether they be Middle Easterns, whatever. Those guys are sinking money in because it's all about ego, right? That's all they want to do. So all I'm thinking is, well, why would you want to compete in that area?
I think cynically, I just think it's a much more appealing project to do Newcastle. So say you compare it to Milan, right? They buy Milan, they invest a little bit of money on the transfer market. They keep Stefano Pioli, who's just one of my favorite coaches. That I don't think you can do much better than him. You buy a team that is deep enough and competitive enough to compete on both a Serie A and a Champions League front, and then what? PSG have not won the Champions League yet, despite all their investment. So no matter how much money you throw into it, you can't buy the Champions League. The Champions League is won on pedigree. It's won by having an institution that is a winning institution that plays great football, and they sort it out. Which is why Juve haven't won the Champions League for forever. Etc. etc. So all they could really do is get Milan to win Serie A if they were to invest in a Milan. I think Milan are going to win Serie A anyway this year, with or without Saudi Arabia. Whereas if you think about the project at Newcastle, and it's not just the Arabs that are making this decision, they have their English emissary. I can't remember what the woman's name is. Anyway, I'm not going to remember what her name is, but she's sort of the go-between, because it's not like the public investment fund are going to give all of their money to Newcastle. So there has to be this middle person. And I think the appeal of bringing Newcastle from, I mean, right now they're going to get relegated, but to move them from there to then being a solid mid-table club, to then competing with the likes of Aston Villa, Leicester City, Everton, and even the likes of Tottenham and Arsenal right now, that would be the next step. And then the next step would then be to get them into the top 4. And then we're talking about competing for the title, which frankly, I don't think half the owners of the big teams give a fuck. I don't think Manchester United's owners give a fuck about winning the Premier League. Otherwise, they would have a good coach. So I don't know if the project is to eventually win the Premier League. I think the project is to slowly, over the next decade.
Man United, American owners.
They just don't care.
They don't give a shit.
They don't give a shit. They just want to keep dipping into the profits, which is what they've done.
The Saudis should buy. They should buy Olympiacos. What are your leanings in Greek football, or do you have any at all? And also, I want to talk about your Greek background versus Italian background.
Absolutely.
The differences that you see and the similarities that you see. But anyway, do you have a Greek team, or do you follow Greek football?
I was actually going to raise this before.
Okay.
I was going to raise this before when you were talking about how sweet it is to suffer with your club,
right,
as you support Roma in the face of the monolith that wins all the time. I'm a Panathinaikos supporter.
Oh, Panathinaikos.
They have a little
arch enemy.
Yeah.
Roma and Panathinaikos have a little bit of a gemelaggio. The fans kind of
Yeah, there's
have a bit
kinship.
of a romantic relationship for some reason. Just I think because of some
100%.
friendlies they've had. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, go on.
They've also swapped a few players over the years. And so Panathinaikos win one title maybe every 15 years if they're lucky.
So they are the major rival to Olympiacos, is that right?
Historically, yes, but in the last handful of years, PAOK and AEK have been much more competitive. Panathinaikos are probably the third or fourth most powerful team in Greece. The corruption in Greece...
But Olympiacos are still the Juventus of Greece, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. The corruption in Greek football puts the corruption in Italian football to shame. It's
Right.
it's just the football's just shit, so no one cares. But it's crazy. There's
The passion is probably 3 times as much though from the fans. But...
No. I don't think so at all.
Oh man, I've seen videos where they go mental in the curvas.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe it depends on your definition of passion, because I think Greek men just go to football to express their rage.
Right. Aggression, not passion. Okay.
There's a guy called Marinakis. He's the owner of Olympiacos, but he also owns Nottingham Forest in England. And they wanted to buy a guy called Taxidis, who, if I'm not mistaken, played for Udinese a little while ago. But he plays for he played for Olympiacos, and they wanted to sign him for Nottingham Forest, but Nottingham Forest couldn't front up the transfer fee. So Marinakis just fired him, just terminated his contract, and signed him as a free agent from his other club.
You sound like you have equal Greek accent and Italian accent, like ability to speak with both accents when you say Italian or Greek words. Am I right there?
Yes.
So you speak both languages?
I do speak both languages. I lived with my Greek grandparents for a little while, so I had a pretty good basis of Greek. And then when my parents got divorced, my mum's first cousin from Greece, who's the same age as her, also divorced, came to live with us, and he was basically my father figure from maybe 14 to 17 years old, and he didn't speak any English at all. And so he was basically my best friend in this time, and I learned to speak Greek basically like a Greek would. And he's the one that indoctrinated me for Panathinaikos. And then all throughout my younger years, you go to Nonno's house and they speak the thickest Sicilian imaginable. Kishtukaki Duda.
Yeah. Where in Sicily are they from?
So Nonno is from a town called Camporeale, and Nonna is from a town called Roccamena, which is on the hill that's opposite Camporeale, and they're both maybe 15-20 minute drive from Palermo.
Right. Okay.
How about you?
My mum's side is from a town in provincia of Messina called Sinagra, and my dad is in Naso, which is right next to, you might have heard of Capodorlando, which is a popular coastal town. They're in the Messina province. Yeah. And I've been there many times. Have you travelled to both countries a lot?
Yeah. In 2018, we went and we did Sicily, and I hadn't been since I was maybe 10 years old. And I personally don't think there's anywhere better to travel, to be honest. It's there's no better food in the world than Sicily. It's beautiful. I mean, I struggle with Italians. I mean, like Italians, not us. I mean, Italians, I find them very difficult. So that's something that I have to engage with. But
we're worlds apart, aren't we? Like, we don't see ourselves as Aussie.
Human beings.
We don't see ourselves as Aussie, but until you go there, you think you're Italian, and then you go there and it's like, you're very different in way of thinking, way of working, just our general existence is completely different.
Yeah, 100%.
As much as I love it, and I do feel at home there, but I eventually do feel very grateful for the the real homes, which is here.
You can understand why people love life over there. Like, I get it. Like, you go for a siesta, you go to have a piazza, you have your coffee, you do all those sorts of things.
Cheap.
Right? And it's cheap. Well, I get that. And then I wonder, like, your economy wouldn't be so bad if you didn't, like, go for a siesta and you didn't go for a coffee in the piazza and you did actually went to work. You might
I don't
actually
think it's that cheap over there. To be
not,
honest.
certain places, right?
If you go to the bar in the local village,
All right, you get an espresso for 80 euro cents. That's
or
basically
beer
never
for
changed.
€2
But the difference is they're not working. Like, we will live and we work a lot, and then like basically we work a lot. They don't work a lot, and I get why you prefer that kind of lifestyle. But it is different when you get there. You think, man, like
The differences is not so much, that they have the, 3 or 4 hours siesta and things like that. All right, that's their culture and that's never going to change. But things just don't work. I mean, much more so in the south than in the north. And we've seen it. We've been there together, Mel.
Yeah, sciopero.
Everyone strike every 5 minutes, The trains, the buses.
Scusa, dov'è l'autobus per Nelson? Non lo so.
And, but,
Yeah, no idea.
potholes in roads that are there for 20 years and, the machines at train stations, you're trying to buy a ticket, broken. There's a row of 20 of them. They're all broken. All this kind of stuff. Trying to get information out of people is it's a mission. Nobody gives a shit about helping the other ones because everyone's more, the term is football, all right?
Yeah.
Everyone's getting one, smarter. Everyone's getting one up over the other one. That's maybe it's because there's 60 million of them living on top of each other. So it's, it's a bit more of a rat race.
But
I don't know.
There's also, like, I spoke to one of the, so basically the manager, so you get the patronatals, all these patronatals where they do things for Italian citizens overseas, right? So I spoke to the guy, one of the guys who manages Australia, Canada, South America, does all this. And he basically said Italy has the most laws in Europe. Like, they have the most laws of everything, right? The problem is nobody enforces that law. So they've got a law for everything, but no one actually does anything about it.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's just the way it is. They'll bring something in to fix something out, and it doesn't achieve anything. It's just that's just the way it is. No one does it. And it's the constant battle that you got over there.
There's like a social cultural discord in Italy as well, and particularly in the south. I remember noting that. So we've got my nonna's side of the family are all still in Sicily, but my nonna's side of the family moved from Sicily to Torino, so they live there. So we've been able to
Very common.
been able to visit both to see relatives. Yeah, exactly. To work at the Fiat factory.
All right.
And I remember I had been doing comedy for about a year, and we tried to explain to my Italian relatives in Sicily what it is that I do. And it's so, first of all, there's no direct translation. It's cabaretista is the closest thing.
Cabaret.
So like cabaret. So I'm.
Wouldn't they say comico? You're a comico?
No, because apparently a comico is a person in comedy movies. But somebody that does a live show is different. Apparently, it's a cabaretista. So
Well, that makes sense because all their comedy stuff, and if you ever watch Ray TV, what a shit show that is. Mm-hmm. All their comedy stuff is about doing skits on variety shows, and it's pathetic if you ask me, but they seem to love it. So it's rare to see an Italian stand-up, although there is a guy in London, I can't remember his name, but I've actually seen him, and he's pretty funny. He's got a thick Italian accent, but he takes the piss out of his own, out of our own Italians in London, and and vice versa. Yeah.
There's 2 or 3 stand-up comedy specials that are Italian guys doing it in Italian on Netflix.
Right.
I've saved them to my list, but I haven't had the balls to go and watch it yet. So we naturally, me being put on show in front of these relatives in Sicily, they wanted me to try and translate one of my jokes to them, which never goes well ever. But I thought I would translate the most simple joke that I had, which is about KFC. And we stumbled at the first hurdle because they didn't know what KFC was. And I thought,
should have made it McDonald's.
What do well, yeah, I could have made it McDonald's, but then the joke doesn't work. But I wanted to say KFC, and they had never heard of it. And then I Googled it, and there are like 242 KFCs in Italy. So it's not that they're not there.
But in
it's not that
Sicily,
they don't have access to the internet. It's just that in Sicily there's none, I don't think. But you have the internet. It's not difficult. They just are so insulated. Whatever is happening in the village is their life. That's it. Everything that goes on outside, we don't care.
Totally.
It's weird though. People talking to people about doing stand-up comedy is weird. Like no one ever knows how to respond. We were in Italy recently and we were telling my Italian relatives what I do. The direct translation for stand-up comedian in Italian is cabarettista. I'll give you that again. It's cabarettista, so cabaret, right? So these guys are under the impression I'm up here like, hello my baby, hello my honey. Lost in translation. It's weird though. People just don't know how to approach you. Last year I did a big show like this, and before I went, I invited my girlfriend's uncle to come along, and he was so pumped about it. He's like, "Oh, stand-up comedy, that's so cool, amazing! I'm so excited. I never would have guessed it, because you're just not really that funny." Now I'm a millennial, so believe me when I say I thought about getting offended. But then I thought about him and his profession and his suitability to his profession. And I said it to him. I was like, hey, man, you know what? That's fine. I was very surprised to hear that you're a security guard because you're so insecure.
And what about Greece? Like, how would you compare?
Greece is Sicily, but the whole country.
Right. Well, they took over half of Sicily for a while, and there's still a lot of influence there. I only know that I've seen much influence
100%
when I've been there, because I suppose I'm not as aware of it.
Well, there's the ruins at Agrigento.
Yes.
They're pretty great. But other than that, and Sicilians just being a little bit more handsome than the rest of Italy, there's really no evidence.
I totally agree.
Oh, I disagree with that.
Yeah. But funnily enough, in Calabria, there's one or two towns, like in the middle of Calabria, where they are basically Greek and speak Greek and have the Greek flag up in the piazza. I saw a documentary about it.
That's actually the second largest Greek church or something outside of Greece.
Amazing. They've just kept this Greek culture. You would expect if that's going to be somewhere, it would be in Sicily, but they actually took hold of Calabria as well. Back in the...
they probably had all the southern Italy, probably all the way down. Probably had some Greek influence back then. I mean, Pythagoras was from Calabria. Just saying.
Just saying. It was a big
was Greece that bad that they had to go to Italy? No.
They needed more olive trees, right?
They were just running away from the Turks.
We grew up with... me and Mel went to school together. We also actually played soccer together. That's how we met.
Unfortunately,
at a club called Balcata Etna. All right, so obviously created by Sicilians back in the 70s or whatever.
My knee injury, mate, ruined my career.
We grew up living about 6 or 7 houses apart on different streets, but about 6 or 7 houses apart. And then we went to high school together, and we had a number of Greek friends that we went to high school with. The majority Italian, but yeah, we did have Greek friends that grew up with Greeks as well. So, and there was always that undertone of rivalry, Italians versus Greeks. But at the end of the day, they were pretty similar to us.
They taught us all the Greek swear words.
Did you do? Buddy.
Well, that's kind of the story of my life. I'm surrounded by Italians and Greeks, and all the Italians, to them, I'm the Greek guy, and vice versa with the Greeks. Not accepted fully by any of them. It's all you're half. You're not both. You're half. And then they all think, Italians couldn't possibly think they're any more different to Greeks, and same for the Greeks, but to everybody else, it's the same fucking shit.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm caught right in the middle of all of this.
Well, you're caught no matter where you are, because over here you're in between Italian and Greek, and over there you're between Italian and Aussie or Greek and Aussie. So yeah, you can't win wherever you are. You just got to, I don't know, move to India.
I can't win no matter where I am at, and so I'm concluding somewhere here that I hope is interesting. But I've found myself really frustrated because I never wanted to. I love Joe Avati, and I've opened for him a few times, and I love all of the traditional WOG comedians that I'm sure you guys all love. I was so influenced by them when I was a kid, but I never wanted to be, when I started comedy, I didn't want to be just that. I want to do jokes about my entire life, not just my ethnicities. So the show that I did at the start, I had a little bit about being Greek and Italian, and I compared my nonno to my papu and stuff like that. And then the rest of it was completely different, just normal jokes that had nothing to do with my ethnicity. But people feel tethered to culture, and people see people need simple stereotypes to grasp onto. So despite the fact that I only had a small proportion of my material being related to my ethnicity, I'm the Italian Greek guy. That's who I was immediately. And my videos that are about my ethnicities are the most popular ones, and you sort of just get pigeonholed as that. And so my next show that I'm going to tour next year is called Don't Call Me a Wog. And it's kind of talking about, like you guys say, that being caught in the middle, that the Italian guys, I'm Greco, the Greek guys, I'm the Italian guy, Aussies are like, you're just wog, and the rest is what it is. And I feel like me. So I'm kind of discussing how I didn't want to be pigeonholed as the wog comic, but I'm also a little bit a wog comic, if that makes sense.
I'm goddamn proud of my heritage, so you can believe I'm going to make fun of it, you know? I'm half Greek, half Italian. I tell people this, and they have one of two reactions. They either say, my goodness. That's so exotic. Or they say, mate, isn't that the same thing? It's certainly not the same fucking thing. They're two very distinct brands of craziness.
That'll probably cement your pigeonholing even further by calling it that. But that's what works, right? So yeah, great.
Right now, I couldn't care less. I'll be pigeonholed. Just give me money. I don't care.
Got to work.
That's true. I say to Mel all the time, like growing up, you grow up Italian. We're in Australia. You have a blend of cultures. I can't imagine doing half Greek, half Italian in Australia, right?
Amplified big time.
Like, having said that, though, you can go anywhere, and I think you just learn to blend. I think people forget that benefit we had. We used to learn to, like, Melo, I reckon, got a face around. He could fit in any country.
I have been called so many different countries.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually.
I went to America. I was Puerto Rican. I went to China. They called me Indian.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Malaysia. Salam alaikum salam. I was Lebanese.
Yeah.
And then I was Iraqi.
It's Becky, wasn't it?
No, that was another one. And then I went to another restaurant, and I'm sitting down, and this guy comes up to me, excuse me, sir, I don't mean to be rude, but can I ask you a question? Of course, far away. He goes, what culture are you? Where do you come from? I said, well, I'm from Australia, but my parents are Italian. And he looked at me and goes, Italian? I said, yeah, I'm Italian. And what happened was he turns around to his other waiters and says, oh, no, he's Italian. And they're like, shit.
Yeah, that's taking
shit. And I said,
they
well,
were taking bets.
They were taking bets. I was like, well, what do you think I am? You look Uzbekistan. Uzbek. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
you look Uzbekistan. I was like, okay, that's a new one.
Melo had more. I love it. Because I'm like, we always discuss, Melo could fit in South America,
North
problem. America, Australia, Italy, Greece. He could fit in India if he needed to. He could fit essentially anywhere but China.
Anywhere but China, stick out.
And it sticks out like sore thumb in China. But anywhere but China, Melo's all right. And I think, like, growing up with different cultures, it helps you. Like, you go somewhere and you just, I don't know, I think you feel like you just learn to blend. You learn to blend with everyone. You understand. And you accept it for what it is. You're not you're actually the opposite of pigeonholed.
Yeah.
You go about the flow. That's what it is. And you accept it and move on. So I think you maybe later on down the track when you're a bit older, you'll look back and go, you appreciate some of the differences. As much as it made it hard growing up, it makes it, I don't know, I think you have better stories from it, I say.
I would agree with you in most contexts, but let me tell you, in the world of stand-up comedians where everybody needs to have a niche, I have always been the Italian guy. And they won't talk, I'll wear I remember this one time I was walking around in Melbourne, it's during the comedy festival, and I was wearing just a blue t-shirt, and this one comedian sees me and he goes, oh, you're wearing the Greek flag today, huh? And I said, no, I'm just wearing a blue t-shirt. But they can't, they need something to tether it to.
having said that, I think if you went overseas and did some comedy, you would no longer be the Italian comedian. You'd be the Aussie comedian straight up.
Guaranteed. I'd be Aussie. No matter if I went overseas, I'd be Aussie.
You know, you mentioned Joe Vardy. He's gotten quite popular, I think, in Canada.
Canada.
I'm not sure about America.
There's
but
a lot
I've
of
seen
Calabrese in Canada.
some of his skits from on stage in Canada. Yeah. So what is he kind of pigeonholed as, the Aussie Italian guy, or like in America and Canada? How does that work for him?
No, he is the premier Italian comedian. But
so they don't have an equivalent, like a Canadian equivalent of him, or an American equivalent of him.
That Sebastian
Maniscalco. Yeah, I love him.
Sebastian Maniscalco is basically taking the Joe Vardy formula and applying it to a much grander scale because he's American.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's more like you, where you mix in a lot of general comedy, not just ethnic comedy, right? He's got both. You've got both.
Yeah.
And Joe Vardy is pretty much just the ethnic stuff, hey?
And he's, Joe, I've spoken to Joe so many times about it. I just can't understand how this guy was selling out theaters in the United States in years like 2000 and 2001 with no social media, no YouTube, none of that. He was just able to market himself that well.
If I remember correctly, I think it started with a bootleg CD or whatever that just went around. Everyone was making copies back in the day when we used to copy DVDs. Because I remember I brought it home, his first CD, put it on for my mum, and at the point where he's talking about his nonna telling him to go out to the back shed and feed me due patati, my mum was on the floor because she was basically saying, "That's my mum." So he just hit the nerve more than anyone ever had in Australia.
But we never thought of that as comedy. That's the thing.
100%. It wasn't just comedy; it was life.
No, but that's exactly,
and that's what my mum was seeing.
Which is
she was seeing a reflection of her childhood
100%.
in Chewett Hill.
He took a niche that it wasn't a joke. That's just what happened, right? And then he's explained them. We're like, that's shit. That is a joke.
The school camp.
What he did was he he held up a mirror to everyone's life growing up that you didn't realize was funny. He showed you, I'm observing how you grew up, and when you look at yourself, kind of like looking at your life from above kind of thing. That's what he did for everybody, for Italian Aussies, and made everyone realize the humor in it that they hadn't quite picked up before.
Yeah.
That's what we say, really, the essence of comedy is, especially stand-up. It's you're repurposing a thought that people had subconsciously. You're repurposing things that people know.
Jerry Seinfeld.
And you're framing it in a different way that they wouldn't have thought of before. And that's why jokes work, because the audience's brain clicks and goes, oh, no, I do think that. I do relate to that, but I just never would have put it into those words. And that's why comedy works.
That's right. It's Jerry Seinfeld humor 101, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Joe Vardy may be responsible for my favorite joke ever because it's very, very niche, and I thought it was hilarious. So he basically started a show with any Australians in the crowd, yeah, this is here. And he goes, I've only got one question for you. What was school camp like? Because I never got to go. to me, that was absolutely hilarious because I never, and my wife was like, why are you laughing? I was like, because I never got to go. You don't understand.
I wasn't allowed to go to school camp.
I was allowed to go to school camp, right?
Mum said no.
And that is so niche that I think that to me is probably one of the funniest jokes I've ever heard because I was not expecting him to ask that question. And I was like, man, that hit a nerve. I never realized I had it, right?
Yeah. That's more correct for, I think, our parents' generation not being allowed to go to school camp. We went to school camp, but we took our Italian sausages and Italian bread.
You went to school
You went
camp.
to school. I
wasn't allowed to go to school
camp. You were there.
Year 6, I wasn't allowed to go.
Not in primary school, mate.
And the other one that was hit a nerve was funny when he said, open the margarine, the flora, and open up, it was olives.
Yeah.
I still cried because my nonna did exactly the same thing.
And
olives.
we still do it now. It's a perfect container for it, right? Those little things that I don't think I think of them as niche, right? But I don't know how that must have been extremely common. But I never would have thought how common that concept is, right? And there is definitely an art to something like that. finding something so common, so obvious that it's not really that funny. He puts olives in a margarine container, big whoop. But just the whole situation is hilarious, man.
The kid coming in expecting to find whatever it is, ice cream or whatever, and you find, olives marinating.
But there's some that transcend the ethnicity. So when they talk about the biscuit container, the oven biscuit container.
But what is amazing is that everyone did the same thing with the same round blue containers. You've got the sewing kit in there and that kind of thing. My wife's uncle, I could bring you the sewing kit. Yeah. The biscuit container. It's amazing. They all had the same thought pattern. It's not like they were sending text messages around. You should use this for your sewing kit. They just all did it, and it was all the same.
But that's the thing. None of us would have ever queried that as odd that we just grew up and the kit was in the tin. But they didn't realize how global, how culturally significant that was for all of us. Really, that's amazing. There it is. There's an art to picking that stuff up.
It's a brilliant way that it brings the Italian Aussie community together when these subjects come up, like we're talking about right now, showing how sane we are and insane we are at the same time, and kind of showing how we're different to just the general Aussie population. It's about that community, I suppose, when it comes down to the root of it.
And also remember, I don't know, probably before your time, I think it was Acropolis Now with George Capignacci. Quality, absolute quality. Wogs Out of Work, Wogorama.
George was my my gateway into working with all these guys, because I got to do a cancer benefit with him, and he was the MC, and I did comedy, and he liked me, and so he introduced me to the other guys. There was a DVD special release of Acropolis Now in 2004 or 2005, I think, and I got it and just mowed through all of them, and I loved it. I thought it was the best.
Great show. And definitely on YouTube, still watch a few highlights. Awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Yeah, they do.
What are your thoughts about firstly, have you seen the Dave Chapelle special on Netflix that is causing a lot of controversy at the moment?
Of course. So me and my good comedian friends, we do this cool thing that we started this year where we will all watch, it's like a book club, but for a comedy special. And then we do a Zoom call every Sunday and we discuss it. And when that came out, that was first on the list to do. And so I've discussed it. I've got thoughts. I don't ever think that any topic is off limits. It's what Dave is saying is calling him Dave like we're mates. What he's saying is it's far from hate speech. Absolutely. If you listen and you pay attention to what he's saying, he's actually being quite inclusive and accepting, and he's talking about accepting different minorities and different demographics from a completely open perspective, and in the face of things you might have thought before. So say you do have these prejudices about transgendered people, that doesn't mean that you can't be friends with them. That doesn't mean that you can't accept them as human beings. And I think the where he causes controversy is by saying you can't tell me that you're marginalized as a white transgender person because I'm a black man in America. So we are still significantly more marginalized than you. Which as soon as you start comparing, suffering, when you start comparing minorities, it gets a little bit hazy. So I don't know if that was a good idea, but that's how he feels. So you go for it. My whole issue with the whole thing is that it just wasn't that funny. I love Dave Chapelle. He's one of the greatest of all time. He's one of my favorites. When he came back from his giant hiatus and he produced a few Netflix specials, I thought at least the first 3 or 4 specials that he did on Netflix were just fantastic. His best. He was so much better at comedy when he came back, and they were fantastic. They were so funny, and I really liked how there were his classic jokes, and then there was also a little bit of sprinkling of the joke is funny because of who I am. I'm Dave Chapelle, so my son knows he's going to go and meet Kevin Hart, etc., etc. The problem with this one is that at least 80% of the jokes rely on the fact that he is Dave Chapelle, which is really lazy. And yeah, I just don't think it's funny enough to justify stirring up the controversy that he has. I'm not saying that I disagree with the opinions that he has or otherwise. I'm not saying that it even matters whether you agree or disagree, because it's comedy at the end of the day. But the idea that he should be banned from Netflix is just like the most popular show of the last 2 months is about Koreans just getting massacred brutally, and we're gonna take Dave Chapelle off, and we're not gonna take that off. It's kind of incongruous.
Yeah. Well, so far Netflix have held firm, it seems, and hopefully they continue to do so. But I totally agree with you, and I like that you put that perspective on it about it not being that funny and relying on it just being him to be considered or perceived as funny. I think, yeah, it's largely storytelling more so than being comical, because he tells the story about his friend Daphne. But I think the key line to the whole show, to show what his real feelings are about transgender people, is when he says something about it. She's just having a human experience, and that to me was the line that just went, "Fuck, that's it." You know what I mean? It's just another human experience that someone's having. He's recounting that to you, and it's a completely different human experience to the one that we're having or that you're having, but it's just a human experience, and that's the key to what his real opinion is on transgenderism, let's call it. He's accepting of it.
And then also he finishes that the actual closer to the special is he talks about potentially meeting his friend's daughter or son, and saying, I knew your father. She was a wonderful woman, which is it just encapsulates everything that he's trying to say.
Absolutely.
I might believe XYZ and people might think XYZ, but if somebody wants me to treat them in this way, of course I'm going to treat them in this way. We're all humans.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah. No. I enjoyed it for the most part overall, but it's just emblematic of cancel culture these days that, people, I call it the rent and offense crowd. Everyone just wants to be a victim and wants to be offended because, I don't know, they're broken, and they're broken as a community. I'm not talking about transgender community, just people in general are just so broken these days that they just need to get attention by calling themselves victims. I don't know.
With Dave Chapelle as well, out of all the things to get cancelled for that he's previously done, I'm like, oh, this is the one. Like, Dave Chapelle had some real intense skits, especially early on Chappelle Show stuff. I was like, well, I don't think you could do that anymore, right? Like a lot of the stuff he did then. And I'm like, well, I don't know. That seems like they just all of a sudden decided this is the point I want to do something. And I kind of find it ironic that they're trying to cancel Dave Chapelle, because Dave Chapelle kind of cancelled himself. He was the first to cancel himself. Just took off. Didn't want to do it anymore, right? So I'm like, I find it ironic that you're trying to cancel a guy that, to be honest, I don't think would give a shit if he stopped working tomorrow. Like, I really don't think he would. He's got enough money. He doesn't really care.
200 million in the bank.
And that's why he doesn't give a shit. Yeah. And he's actually said it. He's done another stand-up before, and he had since then, and he addressed it. And he basically said, I'm not backing down. I don't give a shit. Fair enough.
I think probably one of the most important points as well is that at no point in the special does he tell people how to think. He always fosters thought with all of his material, but at no point does he ever think, you guys should think this is how I feel, and you guys should feel this way. All he does is recount a handful of stories that have happened to him and how he felt in the immediacy, and then how he felt retrospectively having given thought about it. And like, that's kind of what art is.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't agree with it, that's okay. You can watch something else. You can consume different art.
Mm-hmm.
And to start a tirade or a manhunt and say that this shouldn't be available for anybody to see ever, it's like, where does the buck end with that? I'm not discounting the fact that a lot of people might have watched it and been really, really upset and been really, really offended, and that's terrible. But I can imagine a lot of people watching Squid Game and getting really, really upset at seeing a whole bunch of Korean people get shot in the head. No spoilers in case anybody hasn't seen it. So it's yeah, it's. I would imagine that a lot of people that were going up in arms about it either haven't even seen the whole thing or haven't seen it at all and are just going off what the sort of echo chamber that they inhabit thinks, which is one of the bad parts about our society at the moment as well. You listen to your mates and you listen to your Facebook feed.
All right, Anthony, we've been going for a bit, an hour and a half or so we better wrap it up. But just to end up, where can our listeners find you online and etc.?
So it's anthony.locash, Locash, on Instagram, and you'll find my links to TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, etc. on there if you are so inclined. There's the Kevin Lasagna Pod Instagram page as well, which will lead to all the links to that podcast. And I'll be touring next year, and I'll third time's the charm. I'll be in Perth next year, so hopefully we can do this again in person, guys, because this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
Brilliant. I reckon we could probably keep talking for another 3 hours because it's been really interesting.
100%.
We didn't get enough to talk about Juventus, but
part two,
and our hate for Inter.
We didn't go into that enough, did we? Just quickly, the penalty in the Inter Juventus game, was it a penalty or not?
Of course it was. Of course it was a penalty.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah.
He karate kicked him. Yes, he was trying to clear the ball. Yes, it was unintentional, but it's on the line. So that means it's in the box because it's on the line. And he violently kicked Alexandro. As clear a penalty as you can. Look, on one hand, and I think Nikki mentioned this on the podcast, the fact that the ball is gone and it's not the foul isn't impeding the play at all sucks, because the traditional penalty that you want is player dribbles into the box, he gets hacked, penalty. But either way, by the letter of the law, it's a penalty. I don't know what anybody's complaining about. It's very, very straightforward.
It's only Inter people complaining.
The fact that the ball had gone is actually irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly.
A player was kicked in the penalty box. It's an open shut case, basically. It's a penalty 100% of the time. And that's it. It is not controversial.
That's it.
It's not controversial at all.
And I didn't like the rhetoric coming out of the game either that, Juventus stole it. They were not the better team throughout the game. I think it was pretty even. I think Inter's goal was extremely lucky. Like, it couldn't have been any more perfect for him. It deflects off Locatelli. It hits perfectly on the crossbar and lands at Edin Dzeko's feet. Like, it's how could you get more lucky? And I don't know about you guys, but the moment he put Paulo Dybala on, who's just my favorite player, it looked like Inter were going down.
Yes, I think we agree on all fronts there in our agreement that it was a penalty correctly awarded, and our distaste for Inter Milan.
Shared hatred of Inter.
Shared hatred. All right, Ant, thanks, mate. Really appreciate you doing this, and we've for this amount of time as well, we've done a hefty podcast here, so it's brilliant. I'm sure that we can eventually do it again. So to all
in person.
In person, even.
A few quiet ales.
Over an espressino.
Or do we do it the next day when we're hungover?
That's a bit more my style. I'll be there next year, guys. I know it. I can feel it in my hot Italian Greek blood. But thank you for having me on, and keep up the great work with the podcast, guys. As in Serie A Chronicles, it's awesome. It's quickly become my favorite pod.
Brilliant.
So well done.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate that. And for all our listeners, make sure that you go and listen and subscribe to the Kevin Lasagna Appreciation Podcast. And your other one, the Hack
Pack Podcast, if anybody's interested in hearing opinions by comedians that don't mean anything.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks, mate. We'll talk again soon. And take care.
Take care, gents.
So, like I said, half Greek, half Italian. There weren't a lot of Greeks and Italians at my school for me to relate to, but I grew up around a lot of them outside of school, which was weird because none of the groups really accepted me. They always made me feel like a mutt, like a filthy mudblood, and I never got accepted by either of them. The Italians would always call me Greco. The Greeks would always call me when they needed money. It was hard out there for a pimp, and Greeks and Italians, they incidentally are the only people that give a shit what the difference between a Greek and an Italian are. They would always ask me this ridiculous question. They would always say to me, Anthony, do you think you're more Greek or more Italian? I'm like, no, guys, it's 50-50. That's how that works. I know that it's 50-50. And like, no. What I meant was, do you feel more Greek or more Italian? Like, how do you want me to answer this question? How do I do this? Like, how do I feel? Like, what do you want me to do? Go on WebMD, type in my symptoms. Like, all right, shit at soccer and I live off past glory. Tick for Greek. But I grossly overstate the importance of my art for wider societies. Tick for Italian. I'm shit with money. Tick for Greek. But I'm not above doing some shifty shit to get money. That's tick for Italian. I'm hairy, I've got a beard, I've got eyebrows thick as cafe toast. So tick for both. But I'm never ever creepy around women. Never creepy around women, so that's a tick for neither. WebMD diagnosis, even Steven, guys, 50-50, tick for both. Found out recently I'm not allowed to get married in either one of the churches, though. I spent a lot of time in Greek Orthodox church growing up, but I'm not baptized Greek Orthodox, I'm baptized Catholic. But when you're 12 years old and you're Catholic, you're supposed to have your holy confirmation. And my parents got divorced around that time, so I never got around to having it. So I'm not allowed to get married in either church, which makes me a religious free agent. Yeah. And guys, all of the major franchises are after me. I've been fielding offers from all the big boys. Jews came in pretty strong. They were pretty keen for me. They've seen my game tapes. They've seen how much I complain and how small a mistake a waiter needs to make before I decide we're absolutely not tipping today. And folks, they're impressed. It actually seemed like a match made in heaven, but we went into salary negotiations and they lowballed me, so couldn't do that one. The Hindus then came in pretty strong. The Hindus were pretty keen for me. They said, look, we've got a pretty stacked roster this year, maybe next lifetime. But then the Muslims are the most keen of them all. The Muslims are really, really keen for me. They came in very strong. Now, the Muslims are coming off the back of a couple of pretty shitty seasons, you know. They'll basically accept anybody with residual teenage angst and a decent beard. But they were only offering a short-term contract, so... Thanks for being cool with that one, guys.